We'll just go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Craig Wansing. Kelly Jackson and I direct the Robert Nusbaum Center here. We're so grateful that you're here today. My guess is that probably all of you have seen at least one of the Inside Out movies. It is, if you go to the Virginia Marine Science Museum, they have a special exhibit on that. And if you've been taking a class with Dr. Lindvall, you know a lot more about Inside Out as well. And we're going to be hearing more about, from both Dr. Emmanuel and Dr. Lindvall, about a book that they're working on in the future. So we're very excited about that. Today, in an age where emotions play a larger role than ever, these three professors, drawing from philosophy, cinema studies, and psychology, are going to explore the insights of the film on moral decision-making, emotional identity, and life transitions. We are so grateful to have Dr. Stephen Emmanuel, Department of Philosophy, a.k.a. Anxiety, Dr. Gabby Martorell, Department of Psychology, a.k.a. Joy, and Dr. Terry Lindvall, Communication, Religious Studies, Film Studies, Sadness. Thank you very much.
I can't believe I'm here and doing this. And you probably didn't know that I wear reading glasses, but okay, that's my cue right there. Let me see. Hi, it's me. You might remember me from my vast body of work in film, TV, home video, or perhaps the fantastic role that I've been playing in your life. But we'll get back to that in just a moment. Okay, first, my agent says that I have to plug the movie, the fabulous smash hit, Pixar's Inside Out 2, where the story picks up with Riley, and she's entering that glorious stage of life that we call puberty. P-U-B-I-T-Y, puberty. I see we have some people from the Bay Area, perhaps, Beantown. Yeah. Well, anyway, this is where things get really interesting. And you know why? Because puberty is that time of a person's life where I do some of my finest work. My finest work. I'm going to let you in on a little secret about how I prepare. I read a lot of philosophy. A lot of philosophy. Oh, lately, I've been watching a lot of political news. Oh my God. Don't watch the news. I'm busy enough as it is. So, just a word to the wise. Oh my goodness. These glasses aren't, I need a new prescription. I can't see anything on my board right here. Anyway. Oh, I didn't change my screen. Look. There I am. One of my favorite philosophers is Søren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard, in Danish, is pronounced Søren Kierkegaard. And I mentioned that he's Danish. Fun fact, Kierkegaard in Danish means graveyard. Kierkegaard, graveyard. People think he's kind of a gloomy guy. He wrote books with titles like Fear and Trembling and Sickness unto Death. But he's actually not a gloomy guy. He's really not a gloomy guy. He's not like this guy over here, right? His books have some really positive messages in them. You gotta dig, and you have to get past all of the sickness unto death and the fear and the trembling. But if you put the time in, you find what that really positive underlying message is. Now, I love this guy because, not just because he wrote a whole book about yours truly. By the way, I brought my copy with me. Here, see, here's good. Here's the book right here. I made a few updates, more contemporary feel. The book, yeah. This is large print edition. Yeah, the old fots out there in the audience will know what I'm talking about, right? Am I right? Okay. Where am I? What was I going to say? Oh, why do I like this guy? Kierkegaard. He gets me. He totally gets me. And he knows what it's like to be me. Because I tell you, you have no idea. You might find this hard to believe, but people don't like me. People don't want to see me. You know, I'm like the dentist, proctologist. Can I say proctologist? Yeah. Okay. At any rate, where do I go from here? Oh, okay. Well, I'll just start talking about, let me see. You know something? I'm not very organized, and I tend to be extremely forgetful. And I've written down all my notes here, but I don't understand anything that I wrote on this board right here. So you're just going to have to bear with me. I know what you saw in the film. It was, okay, honestly, it was a train wreck, right? It was kind of a train wreck. But I was also the star of that film. Let's just remember that, okay? I was the guy, I'm sorry. I was the guy who brought the action, who brought the dramatic tension. You guys brought the popcorn, I brought the crazy. Because bringing the crazy is what I do. Now, so let me tell you a little bit what's going on in that movie. So you meet Riley at this particular point in her life, right? Where she's hit that magic stage, right, in her life, and she's having all kinds of different feelings. It's like, boom, right, puberty, boom, middle school, and the ground just opens up, and it disappears from under your feet, because all of a sudden, your body's changing, and your relationships are changing with people, and you just don't know which way to turn. And my buddy Kierkegaard here, as he puts it, you know, it's like a dizziness of freedom, because all of a sudden you realize there's your future. Your future suddenly appears, and it's coming at you, right? And you're not ready for it, because as you were growing up, your whole childhood, you're just bouncing around in those little islands of personality, right? Little bundle of emotions, trying out all the feels, all that, carefree, right? You weren't thinking about death or taxes, not yet anyway. Which means you're not finished with me, by the way, but that's another story, that's another chat. Oh, that's Inside Out 3. I'm gonna pitch that one to my agent, see if we can get that one made. Existential dread. I think that one's gonna work. So, all of a sudden you're in this situation and you know, you don't know which way to turn, right? And you think that this is a horrible thing, and it feels like a horrible thing. But the truth of the matter is that what I'm doing in this role here, right? I'm playing one of the biggest, I'm doing you a huge favor. I'm like an alarm bell, right? Going off saying, hey, time to wake up. You have to start making some decisions. You have to start choosing, right? And that's a terrifying thing to have to do, especially at that age. And your response to that very often, well, the train wreck, you saw what can happen, right? Because immediately you just start reaching out for those rails that you were leaning on your whole childhood, right? The things you don't want to give up, and you're trying to avoid making decisions in your life. But the more you do that, the worse it gets for you, right? Because at this point, there is only one way, and it's forward. And the only way you can go forward is by choosing. And when you're choosing, you're taking those baby steps toward your moral and spiritual development, right? And this is the most important stage of your life in terms of becoming your true self, becoming who you are. And the problem with this whole situation, the reason that it's a dizziness of freedom, is because nobody can do it for you. Only you can do it. Should you become a dentist? Should you become a proctologist? Should you go to law school? Should you have a family? Should you get married? Well, who knows, right? That's the future. That's the possibility that you're coming face to face with. And it's just terrifying. And so I'm there helping you to come to terms with this fact, right? Waking you up, like an alarm bell of the soul. There's an expression that comes a little close to something that my friend Gabriela says, right? And the moment you start doing that, stepping forward into that future, defining who you are, right? That's when you start to realize that you don't have to wallow in that dizziness and suffer all of that confusion. It takes some good friends. It takes some support. You have some family. You have people who kind of help you along the way. But ultimately, it's up to you. These are the decisions that you have to make. And Kierkegaard really understood that. So he gives me props. Right? That's why I like this guy. Right? Because he says, unnecessary. I'm a necessary part of the most important stage in your development as a human being. And, okay, I've got a little bad news for you. It doesn't end after that, because you're going to have to keep growing and moving. And maybe for some of you, 20, 25 years from now, you'll have another moment. Maybe you'll be thinking about, you might be closer to the end than you were to the beginning, and you're thinking about the things that you've done, and you start worrying about whether you've done enough, and then you start thinking about that big question about, I don't want to, let's not talk about that. But at any rate, you start wrestling with these things again, and it's all about learning how to get yourself sort of right with that. Kierkegaard is. Kierkegaard, the best way to sail through this whole process was to realize that we all come from somewhere. And at the bottom of it all, the thing that ties our personality together, that helps us to make the right decisions, that helps us to flourish in the world, is to realize that we have a spiritual nature and to connect with that spiritual nature. And when we do that, it's something that empowers us from within, and it gives us the strength to face any kind of challenges. It's not going to be easy. It's never easy, right? Inside Out 3, Existential Dread. Look for it. The cinemas near you, because I'm hoping that I'm going to have another starring role. Oh, you've been wonderful this evening. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've probably run out of time. Did I run out of time? Run over time?
All right. Okay. That's me. I'm Joy, right? And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the emotions, right? Now I'm going to focus on the 5 from the first Inside Out movie. And the reason for that is because these have been identified by psychologists as what we call the 5 basic emotions, right? So there's the original photos that were used in some of the research, but there's research both in what we call weird countries, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, right? As well as in indigenous groups that shows that people everywhere across the world, right, recognize the same facial expressions, and from what we can tell, have the same subjective experiences, right? So, for example, right, how's she feeling up there? What do you think? Right? She's mad, right? What about that guy? Right? We recognize these, right? So we call them the basic emotions, and each of them is information to us. In my kind of perspective, I think of emotions as, well, what are they there for? What is their function? They are part of our species architecture. We are born with them. So for example, even babies who are born blind will make these same facial expressions even though they've never seen them in anybody else, right? So we know that this is something that's inside us. And so we think about, well, what type of information is it giving to us, right? I'll start with joy. That's the best one, right? Right? Joy changes the way that we think and that we process information. It is a signal to us that we are in a safe environment, right? And it leads to cognitive processes, so the way that we process information, that's kind of very broad and shallow, but also lets us see different connections, right? It's associated with creativity, for example, right? And it also helps us build bonds with other people, right? Joyful experiences are how you cement many of those social bonds. Right? Sadness, what is that telling us? That's telling us that a goal has been thwarted, right? But we can't really do anything about it. So it's demotivating, it pulls you back from doing things. Now, it's also a signal to other people, right? I need you to help me, right? So we respond, right, with comfort. And social bonds is one of the most important things for well-being across life, right? That's when you find out who your real friends are, right? When there's something that happens. During the good times, it's easy to be a friend. During the bad times, it's more difficult. So it's kind of a way to weed out, let's say, the fair weather friends. Anger, that tells us that we have a goal that's been thwarted, but we think we can do something about it. So we're going to go ahead and get mad and try to do something. So it's a motivating emotion. Fear tells us we're in danger, right? It usually elicits, for example, freezing, right, or fighting, or fleeing, right? So it motivates us into different types of behaviors that are all designed, hopefully, right, to keep you safe. Disgust presumably originally evolved as a means by which to avoid the ingestion or contact with possible substances that could be harmful. So, for example, who here likes the smell of poop? Anybody? No? Oh, okay. Dead bodies? No? Rotten food? No? Well, the reason for those things is those humans who didn't feel the same way, right? They would presumably have contact with pathogens and over long periods of time, right? Perhaps are perhaps not going to be as successful as other humans, right? Now, in addition to that, it eventually, once it was there, because evolution often co-ops things to use them for different purposes, also became a way by which we monitor some social interactions, right? So we think of disgusting things, right? And we are also wired to find certain things that are more social in nature, disgusting, right? Anybody watch White Lotus? You may know where I'm going. What are your feelings on incest?
Oh, God.
Gross, right? It's really gross, right? That's a really good example, kind of the social function of disgust. And then surprise, right? Surprise, which was not one of the 5 covered in this movie, right? This is kind of a signal to you, something has changed, right? You need to change the way that you're dealing with things. So all of these have really profound informational value, right? Now, in human development, right, I say that they're universal, they're innate, and they're informational. And they're internal guides that really kind of shift our decision makings and our goal setting over time. Now, when babies are first born, right, they have essentially this undifferentiated distress and kind of contentment. And over time, as we become particularly more cognitively complex, those all branch out into more and more and more kind of sophisticated types of emotions. So after the 6 basic emotions, you start to have more cultural issues at play, right? Now, we also get better at emotion regulation, right? And that's the ability to either minimize or maximize your emotional expressions, right? If you're angry at someone at work, but you can't yell at your boss, right? Or maybe somebody gives you, I don't know, a birthday present that you don't particularly like, and you're like, oh no, it's lovely. I love it so much, right? we use that to regulate social interactions. And our brain changes help regulate these processes. There's 2 big spurts in brain development. That's early childhood and adolescence. And adolescence is where there's a huge amount of brain development that's relevant, essentially, to the emotions that we feel and what elicits them. So, how does this relate to kind of identity and morality? Well, if you remember in the movie, they talk about core memories. One of the things about our memories is they're not what we would call cold cognitions. They're tied to emotional content. And emotions, it's kind of, think of it as like a file folder, right? And that might be a little tag that you have on there. And what particularly strong emotional responses, what that tells us is this is something important, right? So it tags it with memory. And those memories become part of our identity. So this is kind of a field in psychology called narrative identity. So if you think about who you are, you try to describe who you are to somebody else. Think of, for example, when you're getting to know somebody, the stories that you tell, right? That's your narrative identity. And because emotions are so much of a part of that, right? Our emotions have a profound role in shaping who we believe ourselves to be, right? They also help shape our morality. Now, not so much the basic emotions here, but we have a set of emotions we call the social emotions, which is shame, pride, and guilt, right? So think about what those emotions mean, right? Pride means that you did something that you know other people think is good, right? Shame, you did something that you know other people think is bad, and they know about it. And then guilt, you did something that other people think is bad, but you know that they don't know about it, right? Now, all of those are motivating. I don't like to feel ashamed or guilty. I prefer to feel proud, right? So that's going to motivate me into behaviors that are going to map onto those emotions more cleanly, right? And so the inside-out takeaways, right? Essentially, all of these emotions have valuable information that they're giving to us, and all of them are valuable signals that we are giving to other people. That's why we have facial expressions, right? That's the whole point of them, to transmit, this is what's going on with me right now. And so, emotional development isn't about suppressing emotions or denying their existence or refusing to acknowledge them. It's about integrating them in ways that help shape our understanding of the world and ourselves. So, what we call emotional intelligence is actually helped by when you're able to recognize and articulate and identify and think about the reasons why you're feeling different emotions. Right? And Inside Out does this. I use the clips in my classes as well, right? It does this in a really kind of visually engaging, entertaining way. It's kind of like cognitive neuroscience for babies, right? And so it's entertaining. They don't get everything right, but they make a lot of really complex ideas very accessible and engaging. And in particular, I think you give kids, little kids, who are the intended audience primarily, a way to talk about and think about these processes. Right? Now, I wanted to leave you with a few takeaways, right? So this is, so I'm going to focus now on happiness or joy, right? So this is from a model of what's called intentional happiness, Luboya-Mirsky's model of intentional happiness. Now, most people think that you're happy or you're sad primarily because of the stuff that's happening in your life, right? That's actually not the major part of it. So just like with weight, we have a set point that kind of fluctuates around a particular number, and it's really hard to go up or down from that. Our happiness set point is the same way, right? So, for instance, how many people think that you would be super excited if you won a lottery for $1 million, right? Yeah, I would be super stoked too. But probably in about a year from now, I would feel about the same that I feel right now. So we hover around it. That's our set point. That's genetic, right? A lot of times we think our circumstances, whether or not we have enough money or a good job or a good relationships, but that's actually just a little teeny slice of it, right? About 10%. What we have left over are intentional activities that we can use to increase our happiness and joy in life, right? So, these are all, by the way, evidence-based. I'd be happy to talk about them, but there's a wide array of literature that speaks to each of these points. Right? One is expressing gratitude, right? We don't have kind of a codified or ceremonial way to express gratitude in our culture. And expressions of gratitude, telling people who helped you in life, what they did and how they did it, is good not just for the person getting the gratitude statement or whatever, but also the person giving it. Makes us feel better. Acts of kindness is another one. In particular, there's a huge amount of literature showing that things like volunteering are strongly associated with well-being, right? So doing good things for other people, and it doesn't have to be that. It can be a compliment you give someone. It can be, I don't know. I can think of a lot of things that my teen kids could do, like the dishes, garbage, walk the dog. That would make me very happy, right? But they're not here at this talk, so presumably that's not going to happen. Also, relationships. Our social bonds are really, really important for our well-being. Probably the most important thing. So maintaining and putting the time into, because relationships take time. And they always have drama. That's just a part of being human, right? That's those emotions rearing their heads. But good relationships. Another one is remembering and savoring positive experiences. So, for example, this sounds really cheesy, I know, but things like having a happiness diary where once a day you write down 3 things that happened to you that were good, right, is associated with increases in well-being, right? So thinking about the good times and thinking about who you want to be and thinking about recreating those things, all of those are also associated with increases in well-being. And then the last one, which is not part of Leboya-Mirsky's model, but I personally believe, and there is plenty of research to support it, is also exercise. So exercise is a mood enhancer, right? Now, if you're in a really depressed, bad mood, right, you may not want to go out and run, right, or do exercise or whatever. But as a whole, for kind of maintaining levels of well-being over time, exercise, and it can be a walk outside. In fact, outside, there's something special about outside. But keeping your body moving is also associated with increases in well-being. And that's the end. Okay.
Thank you, Joy. I'm too sad to talk. Just give me a few hours. The Italian poet Dante was kicked out of his city, Florence. He wrote, "There's no greater sorrow than remembering a happy time when you're miserable." Try to think of a happy time during my talk. But I have 3 questions to ask. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? So who am I? I'm a movie star. I was in Inside Out and Inside Out 2, but I wasn't the star. I was the problem. I wanted to be in the movie Titanic, on the raft at the end of the film, where Leo DiCaprio drowned. But James Cameron thought I'd be better as an extra in Avatar. But before the movies, I was one of the 6 emotional moods that Joy talked about. Psychologist Paul Ekman found the universal experiences of all human beings to be these 6 emotions: joy, disgust, fear, anger, surprise, and me, sadness. People often leave out surprise. Not me. I wasn't surprised. But Professor Lindvall studied Professor Ekman's facial acting coding system in his doctoral studies at USC in the 1970s. Over half a century ago. He's still teaching. That's sad. Ekman studied the secret life of emotions and the connections between facial expressions and emotional moods. You can put on a face of anger or anxiety, and you'll feel it. You put on a face with a zygomatic smile and orbicularis and oculus, and you feel happy, maybe even joyous. And little endorphins run amok in your brain. But you put on a face like mine, and you want to become a math major. Except they have too many problems. You become what you put on your face. Paul Ekman found that the Hebrew proverb, "A happy heart makes a cheerful face," to work in reverse. A cheerful face will make a happy heart. So who am I? I'm a movie star and an emotion. But where did I come from? Some people think I came from Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, or from reading too much Kierkegaard. But there were a group of students from California Institute of the Arts who created a brain trust in Northern California to make computer-generated movies. John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, and one geeky Presbyterian, Docter, from Minnesota. He joined them and became a screenwriter and then directed Monsters, Inc. and Up. His little daughter, Ellie, did the voice for young Ellie in Up when she was a spunky, joyous 10-year-old. Of course, in Up, Carl's wife dies. Sorry, spoiler alert. But then at 11, Ellie turned moody, morose, melancholy. I came into her life. Docter didn't understand what was happening to her daughter, so he tried to understand the changes that happen in the emotions in middle school. It led him to the research of Paul Ekman, who showed him that the experience of positive emotions begins to drop precipitously in frequency and intensity between preteen years and teenage years, or when you're a sophomore at Virginia Wesleyan in a Gavin Pate class. The Pixar team designed each emotional character as a shape. Anger was a red brick. Fear, a purple frayed nerve. Joy, a yellow radiant star. Disgust was green broccoli, but in Japan she was a bell pepper. They liked broccoli. But sadness was a blue teardrop, which means I always stay a bit wet. Someone asked if there was anything I could do when I was wet. I said, well, depends. Actress Amy Poehler believed plain joy added extra years to her life. Actress Phyllis Smith from The Office confessed she was very morose, very lonely, and a sad person, so it was a no-brainer for her to play sadness. She said she was in great shape to play sadness, but she believed that mood swings counted as exercise. When students come to professors and lament that they are miserable, the professors laugh and they say, "Of course you are." The plain truth is often the greatest relief that they can give them. The world is painful in any case, but quite unbearable if everyone gives you the idea that you should be liking it all the time. What is unforgivable if judged as a resort hotel may be very tolerable when you see it as a reform school. Welcome to your reform school. So what is my purpose? How did I become so important in the film? There is a real sadness that comes with the loss of childhood and the gaining of wisdom. I said hello to darkness, my old friend, and it told me that it doesn't want to be my friend anymore. Some people look into an abyss and see darkness. I texted at 2 a.m. and I asked, "You up?" I ordered a wake-up call the other day, and in the morning the phone rang and anxiety shouted at me, "What the hell are you doing with your life?" I was feeling depressed. A friend then came and put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "Earth." I said, that meant the world to me. Then she said, "Plethora." I said, that means a lot. My friend told me to achieve inner peace, I must finish what I start. So far, I have finished 2 bags of little chocolate donuts and 2 gallons of ice cream. She may be on to something. Yes, I add blue hues to images of Riley's memories and to yours. But UC Berkeley psychology professor Keltner points out that sadness prompts people to unite in response to loss. It creates compassion and empathy. The Bible says to share in the sufferings of others. Jesus wept, the man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, despised and rejected even by his friends. But then he said, "Blessed are you who mourn, for you will be comforted. Blessed are you who weep, for you will laugh. At the end of the film, I help Riley unite with her parents. They hug, and they sob, and they squeeze each other. Pete Docter's message in the film is simply, embrace sadness. It brings us together. It helps you to help other people. Embrace sadness. So I will be free after the lecture if you want to embrace sadness. Thank you.
I kind of want us to go back and do happy again or joy again.
I'm also Gabby, so I can talk a lot.
All of us have all sorts of questions, I'm sure. I'm just going to throw out a quick one and answer either one. Either if you could add a new emotion in anticipation of Inside Out 3, or was there a time in the film when you looked at anxiety or joy or sadness when you thought, oh, you came so close to getting it right, but I wish you would have done something differently?
I would, not so much the emotions, I think, of not quite getting it right. I would have a few quibbles with how they conceptualize personality with the islands, honestly. That doesn't really map onto what we know of psychology. So in psychology, we talk about what are called the big five, which are the kind of the personality characteristics. So there's an acronym, OCEAN, right? We like acronyms in psychology. So that's openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So I would have liked those islands to actually be personality components, the big five. So that would be, that would be my quibble with the cognitive neuropsych of Inside Out.
Cool, thank you.
I would add the character of mischief. I think there's something that is often missing, even at university level, where students do not play enough tricks on their professors. I would encourage you to go to everybody else's class and do something like that. But I think there is, in a small child, when my granddaughter Joy, she's 1.5 now, and she can tell when things are being fun. And there's always this twinkle in her eye. And Ekman is really right in saying that what you put on your face is going to affect you. And most of us sit in the classroom with kind of very dull faces. You affect your professor by the way you look. If you look excited, lean forward, and nod, that professor will become more exciting than you ever believe. If you stay the way you are, we will stay the way we are. It just happens that way. So mischief, encourage mischief among yourselves.
I was joking earlier, but actually I think that existential dread would be a fine addition. Maybe follow Riley a little bit further in her journey to selfhood. Yeah, and those would be things that everybody in the audience would relate to.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Not a question, just a sort of humorous thing on your little last clip. 50 years ago, I was around a university where I think it was experimental psych, where I had a roommate. This is where you train rats to run around caves or something, or boxes or whatever, and do what you want and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, my friend, this particular professor always taught from the left side of the room. And this is sort of classic, if you will. He organized he organized the entire class to look down when he was on the left-hand side of the room and look up at him when he moved over to the right. Within 1 week, he had him trained to teaching from the right. And I'll leave that as the mischief one.
Other questions? Or questions you want to ask each other, too? Yeah, John.
I'm curious about you guys and your particular friendships. I would say at my point in life right now that I would say joy and sadness are much better friends than they used to be. When I was younger, maybe college age, I feel like anxiety and sadness were better friends. What do you guys think about
I think it's been a rough year. I think I've had a resurgence of anxiety. So, I mean, to some extent, I think that there are periods in your life where there's a lot of stuff going on. And one of the things about, so I kind of think of transition points in the lifespan as influencing your trajectory. And there's a number of points, you know, so for example, entering high school is typically one, entering college, getting married, deciding to have children, where there's a branch where you can kind of go on a good or a less good trajectory. So I think that when you're at those inflection points, that those are probably times where something like anxiety is going to rear its head again, because you're making difficult and complex decisions. So I don't know that I would say that any point in my lifespan has been dominated by any particular emotion, but I do think that there's times in your life where one or the other is going to be more prominent than the others.
Well, actually, I second all of that. I think anxiety is probably pervasive. And not everybody experiences it exactly the same way to the same degree, but it's always sort of there, and it's lurking in the background, and depending on circumstances, it will bloom and do its thing. But I also think that I would agree with Kierkegaard that it's actually a beneficial thing if you don't let it swallow you. It has to be managed.
Yeah, we have a question right here. Yeah.
When you have adolescent children who are going through that big transition stage for their emotions, do you have any recommendations for how to handle those big dramatic jumps? Or, I mean, you want to help?
I mean, I like wine.
Yeah, that's right. And the question was, if you have adolescent children, do you have any suggestions for how to navigate those times? Could we use the microphone? I think it's just hard to hear for folks. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I guess it's me. I have two adolescents, right? And so I will say, even though I'm a developmental psychologist, that is not the same thing as a parenting expert, right? So I was joking about wine, but also not. And I think just a lot of patience and a lot of trying to, I mean, part of the issue with adolescence is that kind of letting go and finding that balance between try to make sure that they're safe and also letting them be their own person and figure out their own path. So that's a difficult thing to do, right? And you're setting them out in the world and they can make bad choices, right, once they're out there. So I think a lot of patience and a lot of reminding yourself that, for example, if they get mad at you for any one of the millions of things that you do along with existing, right? That this is a developmental phase, that this is developmentally normal, that this is typical. And that you just have to trust that the groundwork that you laid when they were little and much more malleable is going to hold to some extent. But I think letting go is the hardest part of it.
I would show them Inside Out over and over again, just to talk about their emotions. One thing that I've discovered, my great wife, Karen, is over there standing. She's actually called a Karen. But with our two kids, they still talk to us, regularly. It's wonderful. And it's because I think we cared for each other and talked for each other and enjoyed each other as parents. And then laughed with our children. And they did bad things, there's no doubt about it. They were teenagers like everyone else. But I think just to enjoy them and to kind of work through it and listen while it's going on. The patience, love is patient, love is kind, love just waits and for your kids to grow up. Now, the other thing, too, on the trajectory of research has shown basically that you are happiest until you get to your sophomore year of college. And then it begins to decline. At 50, it goes back up again. It shoots back up again, kind of the happiness if you're in kind of a really good relationship and a community and friends. But it's just something. So you're going to go through these troughs even as young people. Once you get out of school, they're going to come. Sadness is going to come. All you have to do is remember this panel. And you can get through anxiety again and remember joy, the best part, and forget everything else.
Hey, Dr. Menace.
kind of a nerdy historical question. I guess it's for Joy. I have this vague memory of seeing something about like Charles Darwin doing like a study of emotions and expressions and photographs of people's faces.
Yes, and the photographs that I showed, those were Ekman's photographs, right? That Dr. Lindvall alluded to. So Darwin, right? Most people know him as the mastermind of the theory of evolution. Although I always like to throw out just hey, there was another guy called Wallace who came up with the same idea but didn't get it published in time. So I just like to give a little credibility there too. But what most people don't know about Charles Darwin is that he was also a developmental psychologist, and he did a fair amount of work on facial expressions. And so that idea that our facial expressions are information to others stemmed from some of that work. So he noticed, you see a dog with its teeth bared back, right? Well, where did that come from? Well, if you're going to bite someone, you got to get your lips out of the way, so you got to bare your teeth, and eventually, over time, that becomes a signal to others. This guy's about to bite you, right? And then you set up a system where that informational exchange is beneficial to both, and then you get the evolution of expressions, right? So he did talk a lot about emotional expressions, both in animals and humans. And one of my favorite parts too, by all accounts, he was a devoted father, right? In his house, I love this. They wouldn't let me use it though when I went there. They have a wooden slide that he built for them so that they could slide down the stairs, right?
He gets splinters.
No, just have fun. And he actually based a lot of his ideas that he developed on essentially a baby diary that he did of his infant son, where he kind of watched him and wrote about it and thought and used that as a springboard for the development of many of his ideas about emotional expression.
Oh, time goes so quickly. Thank you all so much. I'm pretty confident you may not recognize Dr. Martorell. Yeah, let's. Yeah, and during the next week, you'll be able to recognize Dr. Emmanuel and Dr. Lindvall. So please greet them on the streets. Thank you for taking time to be here.